G'day everyone, it's Phil Tarrant here from Defence Connect. How are you going? Thanks for joining us this morning. We're recording live from Avalon Air Show 2019. This is the second part of our live series, web series on air superiority and the network force. Yesterday we looked at a whole bunch of factors looking at the multi-domain state. Today we're looking at autonomous systems in a 5th generation RAAF. It's going to be an interesting chat. There's lots happening down here at Avalon around the autonomous space over this week with some announcements looking likely today. Today I'm joined by 4 people who are going to help me navigate a conversation around the evolving unmanned space for the RAAF. Here with me today is Brian Chappell, Vice President Autonomous Systems at Northrop Grumman. We have Warren King, who is the Interim Chief Executive of Northrop Grumman Australia. Air Marshal retired Jeff Brown, he's the Chairman of the Sir Richard Williams Foundation and formerly Air Marshal Chief of the Royal Australian Air Force. And we also have Air Commodore Craig Heap, he's the current Commander of the Surveillance and Response Group. Some big titles there and a bit of a tongue twister, so hopefully I'll be all right with this today, but it's going to be a general conversation around how unmanned systems factor into the 5th generation fighting force of the Royal Australian Air Force. It's a big theme down here, but this is not just about us. If you're listening to this or watching this today, if you look to the right of your screen, you'll see there is a comment box. What we want from you is for you to load us up with plenty of questions and we'll use them to steer the conversation today. So remember to do that, keep them coming through. I've got an iPad here and I'll be checking in about 10 minutes time and we'll start working it through. Remember, this is an airfield. There is plenty of air movements going on right now, so as they come down we'll just be quiet and let them pass, but we'll keep moving on. I can hear one in the background right now, so the timing is absolutely impeccable. Remember, just to the right of the screen, send your comments in, fire them through, and if you want you can download this later on and watch it, and you get all the coverage on defenceconnect.com.au. We'll let this plane pass right now. So Craig, I might start with you if you give us a bit of a context about how autonomous systems are factored into a 5th generation RAAF under the Plan Jericho, but the wider interconnectivity with the other services as well. What does it mean for you, and how is the doctrine developing around using unmanned systems?
I think they're integral to everything we do, becoming now and into the future, absolutely. A future without unmanned systems is going to have a suboptimal operational performance in the end. And I think that what we've done, we've already demonstrated some of that in Air Force with Operation of Heron in the Middle East and in Australia. We also have watched Army do its work in the Middle East with Scan Eagle and other UAV capabilities. So I think this is just a natural progression as we enhance the technology, as we advance the technology and maximise those things that we're doing under Jericho, which is combat effectiveness, innovation, and then an acquisition process that really maximises the performance of those platforms, so our people can get the best level of performance, the best level of protection, the best level of situational awareness wherever they are.
So what's the culture of engagement or bringing these platforms into the RAAF today? You've still got some very capable and coming online manned platforms, and you have unmanned platforms. The leadership at the RAAF, how you bring this in, the culture of the connectivity of this, how's that developing?
It's great. It's been there for a long time, and we are building towards that, as the United States and other nations are as well. I think really it's part of a team, and the concept of manned-unmanned teaming is absolutely integral in that. I mean, the P8 and the Triton were acquired to replace the venerable P3, which I have many hours, did a fantastic job over many years. But to do the job not just more effectively and efficiently, but to do it better for the changing dynamics of our entire region and for the benefit of Australia, the selection of the P8 as a reactionary response platform covered by a platform with tremendous range and persistence, such as the Triton, and also lots of fidelity in its sensors, huge reach, and an ability to operate it in an all-weather environment as well, is a game changer really for us in this region. And it will, it's an opportunity as well for us and many of the nations and partners in the region to utilise that platform across the spectrum of operations, including humanitarian assistance and disaster relief.
Can I just, look, I think the other thing you got to remember is Air Forces inherently in their DNA are technology outfits, so they're always looking at what the latest technology is to actually get the effect that they need. So I don't think there's any real problem with.
In the hierarchy of the factors of whether or not it's the right thing to do to sort of beef up our unmanned capabilities, where does risk sit within that? The RAAF's inherently risk averse, but it's
Well,
also...
but I think with unmanned systems, the great thing is you can actually take more risk because you're not putting anything other than the platform at risk. And as long as you keep the price point of the platforms down, which I think is critical in unmanned systems, you can actually afford certainly more losses than you can on the manned side.
And there's certainly an aspect of autonomous systems that sometimes we say they're great for doing dull, dirty, and dangerous. It fits that theme when you've got something, a mission that requires 24 hours or being someplace out over the ocean for that long, being able to do a mission like that without putting humans at risk, carrying the sensors that you do. In some ways you can say you're doing those types of missions that couldn't be done otherwise and at lower risk.
So Jeff, in your time with the RAAF as a steward of the strategy beefing up our Air Force, your views now that you're outside of it somewhat and looking to the Air Force of the future, where do you think we're going to be in 10 years' time? What's the Air Force going to look like?
Well, I think I've been pleased at everything that's happened in the 4 years that I've been out. I think it's been on a great vector as far as that's concerned. And I think that you'll see things even probably this week that'll show where Air Force is going to go and the technology that's going to follow. So, hopefully in 10 years' time, we won't recognise the Air Force that we see today.
Well, there's a good question here from Kevin. He asks, how can we make sure that machines don't take over? What's the future look like? Is it all going to be run by machines?
I think humans are smart enough to sort of keep control of the machines, and it's a matter of setting the algorithms and the parameters. And humans still got to be in the loop somewhere.
Absolutely.
But in the broader sense, what would you give up today from technology that you don't like? What was the job of yesterday that you preferred over today? I have a lot of people tell me it was good in the old days. My response to that, the only thing that was good in the old days was that we were young. I mean, what job would you want to go and walk in an old forge again, or would you rather have a computer-controlled machine make steel? I mean, and with all this sort of concern about jobs of the future, there are more jobs in Australia today with all this technology than there's ever been. We have males and females in the workforce, we have an older workforce, so there's more absolute work for people.
And it's better quality work in many respects.
Quality.
More creative, because a lot of the dull jobs have gone towards technology. And that's the same for the Air Force as well.
These systems, even though they're called autonomous or unmanned, it takes the human out of the mundane part of having to, now of course all the pilots are going to come hunt me down, but of the flying and worrying about managing the cockpit situation if you're in a dangerous situation, and allows decisions to be made thoughtfully by the humans that are in the loop of whatever the mission is. So it really allows people to make better decisions about whatever it is that they're doing.
There's a lot of people involved in this whole process, from our politicians and policymakers through to the services and then into industry. There's a question here from David, and I'll get this answer from a service perspective and also an industry perspective. Warren, I'll start with you. David asks, what technology do Australian SMEs or primes bring to autonomous systems that is not simply an import? We need to boost AIC. Your views?
Oh, well, I mean, autonomous is such a global term that SMEs can clearly in Australia can have novel and exciting technologies, because while it ends up in a complete system, whether it's Triton or any other of the systems that are currently sort of at a mature state or are going to emerge, every element of that comes, whether it's materials, whether it's control systems, whether it's certain parts of that or approaches to that. I mean, we're in a hybrid stage at the moment, right? We're mimicking manned technology with unmanned technology. As we move forward, it'll be an unmanned technology, pure in its own sense. So SMEs with clever ideas can all participate, and of course, with the government's policy, now Australia is part of the global market. This is why we've got people like Brian here, looking at what we can do in Australia. How do we bring that into the US? How do we bring it into the Five Eyes community or the Allies community? So there's unlimited opportunities. It's hard for Australia to develop complete systems, although that is certainly happening. But we can play at any level complete systems all the way through to really critical component suppliers or technology suppliers.
Sometimes I think there's a little too much focus on the aircraft itself or a platform, and it really is about the data. And we've got partnerships here in artificial intelligence, machine learning, to work through the data. The data that comes off these systems is extensive, and you need to be able to do a lot of analysis. Again, going back to helping the humans make better decisions. The technologies needed to do that type of analysis and implement those types of algorithms are things any smart, technologically innovative organization can pursue and make a difference.
How's your connectivity with industry, Craig, with these sort of programs?
I think it's tremendous opportunity here because both the P8 and the Triton are in a cooperative program with the United States Navy. Now, part of that, we've already seen tremendous benefits, not just operationally with us being able to influence the design and the capability of the frame, but there's been opportunity to come back to Australian industry that I believe may not have been there otherwise, or at least as fast. Triton is in the early days of its Triton's in the early days of its cooperative program journey, but by the same token, I think those opportunities are there because there is the US Navy and then there's the ADF that's in this program. And so I think those things will come up and they'll bubble up through innovation, where there's things that we see that we've already seen that we'd like Triton to do and we'd wanted Poseidon to do. For example, search and rescue kit. It's already been used in anger by the United States Navy. It would not have had that kit if we weren't in the cooperative program and influenced the USN to have that kit that you can drop to survivors in the water in the aircraft. It's not a capability that was previously there.
And I think the point to emphasise really is the airframe is actually the simplest part of it now. It's actually what the airframe carries and the payloads. And there's enormous opportunities for SMEs in that, as well as, if you use the analogy of the iPhone, it's not the iPhone itself, it's the apps that you've got. So you look at the wide variety of applications that the iPhone's driven. I think that's where we're sort of going with a lot of this.
So there's a question here from Alice, and I guess it's connected with this. You're saying that the platform is important, it's critical, but there's all the other components associated with it. The question here is how do Triton and unmanned systems fit into a fifth generation force? So the role they play in, I guess, an evolving, changing world that we live in, geopolitical sort of challenges in our part of the world?
Yeah, well, from my point of view, they're force multipliers. If you just take Triton as an example, our ability to surveil our coastal approaches with Triton just increases dramatically once it comes into service because of the time it can stay on station and the areas it covers. And I think if you look at unmanned systems as bulking out the rest of your manned force, all of a sudden you can become a much more powerful force with the addition of unmanned systems.
And it's something that's deepening out quite a lot. Even today there was an announcement, there's a question here from Anonymous, any more details about the Boeing Loyal Wingman UAV being manufactured and designed in Queensland? What is its role? I guess the way I'd frame this question, if you've got all these different disparate systems, these different platforms created by different global players or even Australian technology, how can we make sure that they can all work within a RAAF together, irrespective of who the original manufacturer is, and then that sustainment side of things? How would you approach that, Greg?
So I think Air Force has approached that and recognised that a number of years ago, again under the Jericho banner, but really it's with the formation of our Air Warfare Centre, where those areas of expertise, whether they be in the fighter strike community, the maritime community, the air mobility community, the ground defence community, whatever it may be, actually come together and everyone learns everyone's trade at the highest level, and they then have a deeper understanding of how all those different pieces of the puzzle fit together from the beginning of ISR into the actual akinetic or non-kinetic effect in a high-end warfight. So a knowledge of that, an understanding of that, then gets our young people, because it won't be us that comes up with the ideas, it'll be the young people that are actually the operators at the time will say, why can't I do that, sir? That's dumb. Why can't we do that? And then there may be an idea that comes out of that, which then burgeons, and next thing you know, you have full connectivity with systems that have been previously unable to talk to each other or disparate. We've seen that consistently in the last 4 or 5 years. especially given the fact Australia the Air Force has purchased a suite of US Navy capability and a suite of USAF capability. So blending that at speed, and I would suggest faster than even the US has been able to do with our land forces and our maritime forces, because we have to be able to operate across all those different domains, has been a tremendous strength.
So when you look at the doctrine development about how we use unmanned systems now and into the future, how much of that is being led by the utility of what you need in order to execute what you need to execute versus the fact that we've got some very smart people creating this great new technology and we're adapting the way in which we can use it as a fighting force? What leads it? One or the other? Chicken and egg?
I think it's often the idea and the technology, and then we adapt. Militaries at best are a little slow moving sometimes with new ideas, but I think under the Jericho construct there's a permission, certainly within Air Force, to explore different ways, and I've actually seen that flow right across to Army and Navy now in the way that they're doing business. It's
I think
similar
also
concepts.
when you feel technology, particularly in the hybrid stage, when you're moving from one type of technology base to the second, there's a lot of complexity for a start, the rules and how does it work and all that. But actually when you get into the field and you field it, then what we found, and certainly I found in my previous role in procurement, was you could go so far imagining what the technology will do or a certain platform will do, put it in the hands of, in our case, our Australian military, and they will soon find cleverer ways to use it, different ways they want to use it, and we adapted. I think this is just the opening. I don't think you could have this. You won't have this conversation in 15 years' time. If you did, no one would listen at all, because it'll be ubiquitous. This will be a technology, and you're asking, new technologies, how do they fit in? We don't know. Companies, a whole innovation and creativity will come from different companies, different size of companies. Certain technologies will succeed, others won't. And this will take us on a path, you can't control it in the sense of dictate which path you take. You need all this innovation so that you can pick the best, and it mixes and matches with a particular service. And it'll self-solve. Those technologies, those approaches which are the best will work.
Well, in my mind, you've only got to go back to Steve Jobs when he introduced the iPhone. He had no idea of how it would actually transform the way we do a lot of our business. I think that's the position we're in.
It must have been a brave step to introduce a facsimile machine for those old enough to remember, because you had to have at least two people with it, wasn't it?
Remember to keep those questions coming. Just remember on the right hand side of your screen, send them through. We're getting through them, but we've still got a little bit of time, so please keep them coming down line and we'll get them answered. If we don't, remember defenceconnect.com.au. You can even email editor@defenceconnect.com.au. We'll get the team to respond to it offline. I'll keep chatting until this plane goes past and we can feed into the next set of questions. It is a bit technical, a bit operational, and I might get you to field this, Craig. It's from Ted. Ted asks, will UAVs be dropped ahead and then retrieved, dropped and not recovered, i.e. they're expendable, or do they return under their own steam?
I think there'll be a suite of unmanned aerial vehicles or systems in the future, and there may be the potential for the acquisition of ones that are disposable, that are very cheap. I've even watched some of the great innovations and heard about them in this space, of where there are some machines that are basically cardboard, very cheap, and they're plug and play, and then you throw them away to achieve an outcome. I mean, in the Air Force, but we're playing more at the higher end, sort of what we call Tier 2, Tier 1 UAV. Which is pretty much your Tritons, your Reaper-like capabilities, armed and unarmed, things with tremendous persistence, and they're high-tech to support what we want. So I think there's a full suite, but so you look at what land forces need, what maritime forces need, everything from the smallest disposable to the largest, highest tech will have a role to play.
The question for you, Brian, and I guess you can answer the context of your understanding of the Australian context and what you're doing globally. Andrew asks, does the panel believe the advancement of armed and stealthy UASs in Australia being connected by pilot-driven aviation hierarchy? I'm trying to work out what he's asking there, but You know, do you think pilots are going to be able to embrace change and let go of the stick and you know, to Warren's point?
Certainly, and it always comes down to the mission. At least for the foreseeable future, it's hard to imagine a situation where you won't have pilots doing some missions. We someday may get to that point where it is all unmanned. A little hard to see that right now. When you think about the missions that have to be done and the decisions that need to be made about how to execute them the best, sometimes you just need the pilot in the cockpit doing certain things. And in other types of situations, using Jeff's analogy of the app, the mission says I need to go 24 hours, I need to cover all of the South Pacific Islands, I need to help neighbors enforce their fishing rights. You can do that with one plane unmanned and do that with Triton and be able to do that at a repeatable basis. You create almost a deterrence effect. If anybody doesn't know that they're being watched, am I going to try to do something? That applies to human trafficking, smuggling, fisheries, all of that. So those are missions, apps, if you will, hard to do with a person in the cockpit all the time. It'd be very expensive.
But if the question is about, are pilots the right sort of people to introduce unmanned capability, if that's the cultural issue, I think you just got to look at 3 years' time, Air Force celebrates 100 years. It's an Air Force that's kept at the cutting edge since its formation, pretty much, as for what the money can afford and what we can afford as a nation. So I don't think there's any doubt that in the broad, our Air Force will introduce the best technology it can. And there might be some pilots that resist this, or some pilots more forward-leaning on that. But broadly, our Air Force has kept up with the latest technology it could afford to introduce to meet our needs. And this technology is ideal for Australia. Big country, small population. It's going to work, but you obviously need the cultural background to introduce a new technology. Is, as I said, in this hybrid phase where you've actually got a mix of technologies.
We've seen the U.S. Air Force, who've been operating the Global Hawk now for 20 years, still continuing to learn and adapt. And obviously that is very much a pilot culture. And you absolutely have a culture that is being formed, and you see the individual leaders emerging that have the app focus, the mission. What am I trying to do? What is the best tool to get that job done? Recognizing that I'm going to undertake a mission that 20 years ago, I couldn't even imagine. Of course, I need this tool, I'm going to use that app, and I'm going to get that outcome that I need.
It's a great question, and I think we are grappling with it, but by the same token, we're watching the US experience. So the US is already recruiting people into its academy as unmanned aerial system pilots, as remotely piloted vehicle pilots. They are coming in doing a degree. They know that's going to be their role in the future. So it's not a secondary role. It's a role they have joined to do, which they will love. They go through a different process. They know they're not going to fly a manned platform, and it's been highly successful. We need to, the person, but I think where we're going is the person that is going to fly, be the pilot, for want of a better term, of those systems into the future will be very different to the people that have different skills, and indeed to actually operate the aircraft to its peak will need to be very different to what we were in the day. So we're already blending into that to look for those people that have those different skills, and it may be someone who doesn't need to have all the physical and mental attributes and the hand-eye coordination that we arguably had in the day to fly those other aircraft. We're looking for someone who is more from the PlayStation type environment, who is really good at processing information very fast, reacting fast, and is very, I suppose, focused on an event, and can then manage a whole bunch of information coming in and out and then feed it.
But we've had the experience. If you look at a P8 or a P3, the pilot's not actually the critical part of the mission on those airframes, and I think Craig, he's part of a team. But the back end, and it's like Wedgetail, the back end of that aeroplane is where the effect gets carried out. So I don't see unmanned as any different to what we're already doing.
So it comes down to the utility of these
Yeah,
platforms.
yeah.
Absolutely utility. And it's a question here from Linda. We touched on it really briefly, but I thought I'll drill into this a bit, and maybe one for you, Jeff. Big expense this, where it's slated 6 or 7 Tritons, and a lot of it is built around its use in a defence or a national security context. But Linda writes here, how are systems like Triton helping outside of the traditional national security defence realm? So is this future-proofing Australia? Because we don't know what's ahead of us.
Well, let's take. We have natural disasters all over our region. The advantage of a Triton is that if it's airborne at the time, more than likely it can get to the scene faster than any other asset that we've got. And you can immediately do some surveillance of earthquakes, tsunamis, and all of a sudden you get a much better assay on what sort of response you have. So in that whole HADR role, I think it's got fantastic application.
Absolutely. And I'll throw 2 examples and 3 or 4 examples out of where we would have, in the future, 5 years' time, similar event. First thing you'll grab is a Triton within hours and have it on top of a scene. So the Rabaul ferry disaster of February 2012, 350 people minimum in the water in a capsized vessel. We got a P3 on top of that within about 5 or 6 hours to lead the search, to coordinate the search. But in the future, there'll be tremendous opportunity for a Triton that's either on task and or can be staged at speed to go out there, and that poor P3 that day only really got about 5 or 6 hours on task, stretched itself throughout. You can then stage a continuous persistent presence that's searching for both beacons, it's doing a visual search for survivors in the water, it's directing all the aircraft to go to those survivors, all done remotely from Australia, for all our partners and neighbours and friends in the region, if they want to take up that opportunity. So that's one example, and also led the search for the Air Task Group search, the military part of the search for MH370. That would have been the first asset, a Triton, that we would have pushed into any of those search areas to start conducting a visual search.
So we're talking about the acquisition and utility of these platforms, but there's a big sustainment thing. We're going to have these for quite some time. And I think this question here is from a concerned taxpayer, Carissa, and I'll get a view from yourself, Craig, but also from you, Warren, considering your time previously in government. She asked, how does the projected expense of acquiring and sustaining these, inverted commas, higher-end unmanned aircraft compared to our traditional manned platforms? Number one, are they cheaper to service and sustain, and does that add value to our taxpayers? What do you think?
I think in terms of what it can do for Australia, there's capabilities that exist within Triton that we do not have at this point in time. So it's not just like for like, replacing something. This is actually something that we've never had the opportunity to do. The deep levels of surveillance with, again, that fidelity in various areas, or to assist those HADR environments. I think the people that will be saved, and this will happen in the first couple of years, by a Triton going on task, won't be querying whether it's about the same cost, it's a little bit cheaper, a little bit more expensive. They'll just be happy that they were saved, because that asset got to them fast enough and could stay there and protect them and guide people onto them.
So the outcome is the most important thing.
Or you could surveil. I think it is, and you'd have to dive into the figures, but I think they're comparable from my understanding. They're not necessarily massively cheaper. They're certainly more effective and efficient in many ways. But I think I'd probably default to people that...
Yeah, I'll pass to Brian after this plane goes by. Brian will have the detail on Triton and Global Hawk that I don't have, but I'll make a general observation. It's along the lines that Craig saw. It's very hard to compare the sustainment of a new technology with a previous one. And we often got, putting on my old procurement hat on, we often got industry coming to us professing that the new technology was going to be cheaper. In absolute terms, it rarely was. But you have to compare that against the capability. You've got planes that are flying longer, faster, quicker, carrying more ordnance, whatever it is, sending back more data. Trying to compare this. Now, we introduced, AI in maintenance and smarter maintenance and all these things, so that helps to keep the cost down. But at the end of the day, you are maintaining a very highly technical capability, and it comes at a cost. But you think we're just talking about capability. We have a regional engagement now. We're very focused on the Pacific, South Pacific. We give them, we support them with patrol boats. Well, what we can do with Triton, for example, is surveil that area for them and say, don't just potter around your area, you know, trying to find something.
Go here.
Go and
How
have a
much
look at that
target
thing
is.
over there. Now, you just don't have that capability at the moment. You know, we do, but we've got to dedicate it to other resources. So, look, I find that a very hard question. Defence and national assets do come with a cost, but the other side of that is, boy, we have an effective Air Force, Army and Navy, emerging at the moment. And it's an ideal technology for a country, as I said earlier, large country, small population. And this technology, if I could just make a little hobby horse of mine, it also allows diversity. So if you went back to a World War II bomber, unless you were a big, strong person that could control the hydraulics or the connections or whatever, you couldn't fly it. A young female graduating from university today could be easily the preferred candidate to be a UAV controller of the future. You know, our warriors of the future could be the, t-shirt dressed, smartest person in the class. That's going to be the new sort of warrior for Australia.
You may have someone who is in a wheelchair.
Yeah,
Who would have ever
absolutely.
considered that someone who's in a wheelchair
Absolutely.
would be the best person to fly an unmanned, maybe an armed vehicle, maybe an unarmed vehicle. These are opportunities out there, as well as, in some ways, there's a lot of people required in this chain, as Warren has talked about, to both process, exploit, disseminate, operate the frame, keep it serviceable, the capability. But the reality is, a large hunk of them are now going to be, in places such as Edinburgh and Adelaide and other places, they will be fixed at home plate and therefore in home bases, and therefore that they can have a much more more routine life. In many ways, they don't need to be, as we all end up being, medically fit to deploy. My experience is that probably about 30% of our aircrew compatriots don't make it to 60 with their flying medical. And they're very fit in the beginning, but due to circumstances, they don't quite get there. A lot of those people don't have to stop flying at that point. Now they could either roll back and go back into an unmanned system, or we can actually recruit people with specific skill sets that don't even need to have the world's best eyes, don't even need to have the world's best sinus system, because you've got to deal with pressure differences. But they are very, very good at operating maybe a radar or some other systems, or flying an aircraft.
Brian, to get back to the sustainment cost, and your conversation with the Commonwealth right now, how much is that leading the conversations you're having with them? It's obviously there's 6 or 7 Tritons potentially coming on board. A lot of money is being spent on creating the infrastructure to support them. Is sort of cost efficiencies a big component of it?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say it's leading the conversation, but it's a very, very important part of the conversation, and one that we work very, very closely with our stakeholders here. Go back to the previous question. In some ways, it's not a perfect analogy, but these systems, because of how long and how often they're on mission, if you do a simple calculation of sort of dollars per hour, they actually do end up over time being less expensive than certain manned platforms. It's just how you do the math. Here, with a small fleet, relatively speaking, 6 or 7, it becomes very important to be very thoughtful about how you use the system and lay all of that out. We're using the experience that we have had with Global Hawk over the decades, infusing that into the discussion, into the cooperative program with the United States Navy and the RAAF, to make sure that all the best decisions are able to be made. I think there's also going to be a lot of good opportunities, and the plan is that we will be doing a lot of the really technical support for the system right here in Australia. It would be too expensive if all the experts were elsewhere. And it would also impact the operational utility of the system. So putting as much of that capability to sustain it affordably and right next to the airplane here is what we're working on.
But I think the other big point to make with sustainment, it really isn't about the airframe, sustaining the airframe. It's really about the sensors and upgrading of those sensors. A lot of the sustainment costs actually goes in a continual upgrade program of a lot of these aeroplanes now, and that's where I think we see a lot of the increased costs there, Warren.
It is a flying computer.
Yeah.
We've realised that with P8, that it's a system, it's an aircraft you have to log into. So you walk onto a P8, you can't just walk onto it and turn things on and bring the system up. You actually have to log into it like a computer, and your login doesn't work, you don't get onto that computer. There's other ways around that we've discovered, but it is the flying computer as the strike fighter is, as the F-35 is.
I take it
always
even
systems.
one step further, because that's absolutely a very good digital analogy. I refer to them as flying networks, with all of the number of computers and the networks that exist. If you didn't see it inside the platform and you were just looking at a network architecture, this is just the node that has the sensors that's providing the data, and how you manage that and the networks that go behind that. I tell people, if all you do is, when you see one of these airplanes show up, if all you see are mechanics standing around and not network architecture people, digital engineers, be worried, because that's what you need to really get the most out of these types of systems.
We're going to have to wrap up, guys, but let's get a quick summation from you all, just as a parting comment. When we sit down in 5 years' time, if we do this again, we're talking about unmanned systems and RAAF. What are we going to be talking about? Jeff, what's your thoughts?
Look, I think we'll see a lot more as we go ahead, because it's a wonderful way of actually bulking out a small air force with small people numbers. The other thing that I'd say is that this will go across the other two domains probably just as quickly over the next 10 years. I think if you really want to look for growth, have a look at what will happen in Army and Navy.
Brian, parting comments?
I think we'll be sitting here going, wow, we thought we knew what Triton was going to do, but I found 6 other things that I wasn't even thinking of. And that's been the history of these types of systems. You start using them, you have unique missions, the people start thinking about what else they can get out of it, and they do wonderful things, innovating and applying the capabilities to get even more missions done effectively.
That's great.
I think we'll be looking at the opportunities that we knew were there, that we've exploited, and also, as has been alluded to by Brian, by the opportunities we didn't realise existed, because we didn't know that we could actually achieve that effect. And I'd also think we'll be looking and talking about the challenges that we've overcome. And there will be a number of them in the space across a whole tranche, but that's with anything that's in humankind. We have to overcome challenges, and we'll work our way through with smart people at every level, through industry, through defence, through governments, through our partners in the region to maximise what's there. I think we'll be in a space where we'll be comfortable, we'll be very happy, and there'll be a tremendous opportunity for everyone.
And Warren, imagine a philosophical comment back from you.
Well, as probably well and truly the oldest person here, I think this is just the future, and it'll be a great future. I think it'll be against the backdrop that autonomous will be ubiquitous in our society. At my age, I'm hoping for the first automatic car as soon as possible, because the old hand-eye coordination is not as good as it was. I mean, I want to be able to live at home and press a button and say, take me to the doctor or something, So it will definitely it'll be in our trucking, it'll be in our society generally. I actually think the bigger challenge might be in 5 years' time. I agree with all the technology and how it'll be used by the services. They actually will introduce some thoughts about what's combat on. Cyber does this, right? If an outside agency attacks you and upsets your financial system or your banking system or something, is that an act of war, or is that just playing around with your neighbour? And unmanned will introduce another element, I think, which is, you take, let's use a Triton, say, on the long-range surveillance activity. Wouldn't a potential aggressor be more inclined to shoot that down or not? And does that constitute a real attack or not? I actually think it'll move up, the discussion will move up to another level about what the rules of an order-based, a rules-based world is about, and what constitutes wrong and right. Because it will be everywhere, and it won't be should you have autonomous, it'll be what's the next step on autonomous. So that's the philosophical bit.
Plenty to discuss, but gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that. Any questions that we didn't get across, we'll get them answered on defenceconnect.com.au. We'll keep the conversation going. I think we just planted the seed here of many different conversations we can have. I hope you've enjoyed this series of conversations we've been having with our partner Northrop Grumman, Air Superiority and the Network Force. Remember, defenceconnect.com.au. We're here all week here at Avalon. Come and say g'day to us in the stand in Hall 3. We'd like to see you there. Any questions, any feelings, sentiments based on these conversations, please get in touch. You can email the team, editor@defenceconnect.com.au. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.